What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be going through my chaos feedback cycle feedback framework or process into how I basically am able to create processes that are enabled by feedback, because I believe feedback is one of the most important tools that you need to be implementing within your business, and that's what I'm actively trying to implement in what we're building out today and into the future. And if you don't know why I'm doing this, and the reason why I'm doing this is to show our builds live and raw, to basically solve big messy problems, and to build a crew that gets what we're doing so that we can ultimately achieve more and just network with cool people as well. So what this basically is, I took a snapshot of something that we have built out. Is essentially we focus so much on feedback because feedback truly allows us to scale and to understand where we can improve, because what we want to do is we want to build products. And although we're still in the trenches, it's super important, my personal belief, that feedback ultimately gets you to where you need to be. And I solely believe that into the future, the more we just place emphasis on feedback and having these feedback processes, we're only ultimately just going to do us a service for the team as well. So essentially what this is, I like to break down the feedback into specific steps and processes. So from this snapshot, you can basically see we can filter out by products, basically the products that we're building, what specific products or what specific area that we would need the feedback to see, so that we can have that data on there. And then category, we can just categorize it as user experience. What about the user experience could we improve? And then we basically put it into a dashboard, and we're able to just track that to understand, hey, we have this user experience issue and this is how it's looking in month 1, month 2, month 3. And from there we can just say sentiment, which this specific process is powered by AI, and this is what I'm actively integrating as well into analyzing the feedback by taking a bunch of the feedbacks that we're having and just plugging it into AI and understanding what are the summary points that we need to improve on and what they truly are. And then we just create an insights, basically just filtering them out by insights, and then a date of review, which is also super important, just to understand if you want to see from a specific timeline how you'd want to see what the reviews were looking like as to compared to this month. And also the review source, obviously this can change, this can vary. So what this is basically to show where the feedback is coming from. And we like to place a lot of emphasis in terms of feedback. For example, like here we have reviews posted, we have 4 reviews posted, average rating is 4, so we graded out of 4 out of 5 star. So since this is specifically filtered for user experience, there's just four filtered for that. And then obviously positive reviews are 75% and negative reviews are 25%. So for us, what we like to do is to keep the negative reviews under 30%, because that is just a good place to be. Obviously we can try drive it a lot further into the future, but like I said, we're still in the trenches, we're still figuring this out. And what I like to keep in mind, and just a good number or framework to keep in mind, is just less than 30%, and we just keep on refining from that. And then obviously we just have our charts that we can see everything on here. But essentially why feedback matters is, especially you get custom input, so tailors build to each client's chaos, so we can stay ahead in terms of keeping that system that we're building out and evolve it through time, essentially also to trust wins. So feedback to results builds loyalties and referrals. So that is the 3 main points that we actively trying to build in terms of feedback, because feedback is one of the most important things that I believe you should have within your team. Not even just your team, but also what we're doing at the moment with building out systems. We just want to understand the back end stuff of it, and we feed a lot of data, and data is what we want to be heavy about, what we want to just continuously just refine all the time. And this chaos feedback cycle that I have over here, what I like to think about is in 4 different steps, which is For example, in the capture phase, we have 4 different steps, which is what, how, measure, example, and an example. So for example, we say grab feedback from chats. So this could be WhatsApp, Google Chats, wherever the place may be. You just grab that feedback and you need a source or a medium to basically just plug that feedback in. And how, you ask yourself, what is your ops bottleneck? Then you log it, you poll it, and then you track it, just like we've done now. And then you measure, what is the feedback volume? Are we having 5 per week? What is the source, the different sources that we're having at the moment? And then an example of this can be, for example, for wedding businesses, is vendor delays, aviation is crew gaps. So it's just capturing what feedback we need, even if it's positive feedback or you may not think it's important. We just need that to feed into the data, because we're constantly refining, we're constantly understanding how to better the service and the products that we're building out. And categorization, which is also super important, like I just showed you in the dashboard, is you need a way to basically have that categorized, so that when you do need to say, hey, we're looking specifically on user experience in the month of May, March, April, how is that looking and how is it looking compared to now? Is our negative reviews, is it below 30% or is it above? And what have we changed in between them? But in between then, and just by asking those open questions, we can then just basically refine the process. And what this is basically sort into bugs, features, usability. For example, like I showed you, into user experience, is into app products, even the small mundane things, you can also just track it as well. And then how, we basically tag it in Airtable or whatever platform. Then you use ChatGPT for speed if you just want to get a overall summary of it. But what we do is we just plug it in into Airtable, and then we let the Airtable AI fix that up, and then just integrate that as well into it. And for example, what we do, then we measure it, and then category split, is it 60% features, or what, how is it interacting with the percentage of how we seeing it? And an example for this is vendor delays, vendor features, crew gaps, scheduling slash usability, what is it? And then now we move on to the next step, where we basically prioritize it, we rank it with impact. What is the impact that we're having? Is it on a scale of 1 to 10? And the effort and the alignment, although we're still building this out and we're still refining it all the time, is just crucial to just have what really matters at this point in time. And then having the how, which is the priority, which is impact plus alignment divided by effort. So the impact and the alignment divided by effort gives the priority level that this feedback needs to have. And then we measure it by having the average score, which is 3.5. For example, you can look in the example that I just showed now. I think it's 4. Average rating is 4. And then from there, we basically say, hey, top priority completion is 80%. And then from there, we have an example of vendor delays, which is 3.8, over budget tweaks, which is 1.75. Just having that feedback so that we understand where we can just constantly refine the machine. And then we craft, which is basically build fixes, 1 to 2 week sprints. So we basically use Airtable, Retool, Make.com, fast focused, depending on what we're actually building. And then we measure the time to MVP, for example, if it's 5 days, and then we adopt that 3 to 5 days. It just basically depends how we measure that. And then we have an example of, we have the vendor tracker, which for 5 days, or the crew dashboard for 3 days, which takes us 3 days to build out. And then we basically just have that in terms of the crafting of the feedback loops that we are having, or the system that we have built out. And then validation, we say what, which is basically to test with sims or beta clients, just to plug in data, because you're not going to fully understand how it's working until you stress test it by plugging in more data and more just seeing how the system or the feedback session works in that regard. And then obviously we ask the how, which is mock events, track time, errors, cache saved. Also, like I mentioned, like I always mention in my videos, is you need to quantify what impact it's having. Is it a time or cache impact that it's having? And then once you're able to quantify that, you can basically measure that. For example, here we can say success rate is 90% and satisfaction is a scorecard 8 out of 10. And then we basically just understand that key data. And for an example of this is vendor tracker, 3 hours a week saved, crew fixes, 20% error cut, and we basically tracking that feedback internally and also externally for what we're building at. And communication, which is also a very important thing, you need to share updates. In this regard, you need to invite more input, because the more input, the more you can just constantly refine the machine and refine what it is that we're building out and what you're doing as well watching this. And how we do is we just use Slack or email, say, hey, built by X, saved by Y, and what is next. Also, just having that action, those actionables, saying, hey, we have these actionables, and how can we constantly just take action with the feedback that we have and the data. And then we can just basically measure, which is the response rate. Is it 70%? New feedback, example 3 plus, we've got 3 plus more reviews that we need to look at, and then we just plug it into the machine, and then we see how that interacts with what it is that we're actually building out. And an example of this is vendor tracker saves 3 hours. What is the next chaos that we need to understand? And then for measuring the chaos feedback, for measuring, we can basically just have this volume. We can have it in 4 stages, which is volume, which is inputs per stage, speed captured to validation, example 10 days, impact client wins, which is 10K saved, and the engagement that we are having, follow up on feedback. What is it? Is it 60%? Is it below 60%? And just understanding these data points are super valuable in terms of just building it out, what we're actively building. And we just are super focused in laser in on the data. Like I said, like, we're still figuring this stuff out, and we're still just super deep in the trenches on this, but right now we're actively just solving these problems and understanding how we can best make use of the feedback loop sessions that we are having. And for me, data is one of the most important things that I have, and I hope that you watching this, you also just gain something from this and just learn what it is that we're actively doing, and just also just have feedback as your arsenal, in your arsenal, so that whatever you're building out, you just understand how it's going to work. And I know that into the future, we're only just going to scale with this, and we're just only going to be able to build better products while also maintaining feedback. Never say no to feedback and capturing that data, because I know data is going to be the number one thing that we're going to be tracking and looking at every single day as we're scaling up. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, just comment and let me know what you think.